Welcome to the Elselah Books podcast. You know, some stories in ancient texts really jump out at you, and today we're diving into one that's incredibly powerful but often gets overlooked. It's the story of Hagar. Her journey, it's just raw. We're talking slavery, rivalry, being cast out into the wilderness, but it leads to one of the most personal, direct encounters with God you'll find anywhere. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? What does it really mean to be seen when you feel completely invisible?
So let's start with her name, Hagar. It's an Egyptian name. And the meaning, wow, it's almost like a prophecy. It can mean fugitive or immigrant. Right from the get-go, she's framed as an outsider, someone who doesn't belong. And tragically, her name ends up foreshadowing her entire life story. It's all about displacement.
And you have to understand, from the very beginning, her situation is just incredibly vulnerable. I mean, think about the mess that's about to happen. Of all the people involved, she might be the only truly innocent one. Why? Because she's a slave with pretty much zero power to say no. She wasn't really a participant in this drama, she was treated like property.
Okay, so to really get what Hagar was up against, we need to step back and look at the world she lived in. Let's dig into the brutal reality of her status, where she was seen as property, not a person.
Yeah, this context is absolutely crucial. Slavery in the ancient Near East, it was just a fact of life, as brutal as it was common. But for a woman, a female slave like Hagar, the reality was even harsher. We're talking no rights, no choice in who she married, and definitely no say in being used as a surrogate. She was, in every single way, completely powerless.
So where did she come from? Hagar was an Egyptian slave. It's likely she became Abraham and Sarah's property when they left Egypt, kind of like part of the package. And over the years, she actually became Sarah's trusted maidservant. Now that's a position with some level of importance, right? But that very trust is what's going to put her right in the crosshairs of her mistress's biggest, most desperate crisis.
And this is where things really take a turn. This whole situation leads to what you could call the surrogate's pride. It all starts with a plan, a really desperate plan, that's going to have some painful, unforeseen consequences for, well, pretty much everyone.
Okay, so Sarah is facing this immense cultural shame because she can't have children. So she falls back on a common practice for the time. She tells her husband Abram to sleep with her maidservant Hagar to get an heir. For Sarah, this was just a practical solution to a problem. But for Hagar, it wasn't a choice. It was an order she had absolutely no way of refusing. And what happens next is just an emotional explosion. You've got Sarah on one side, just drowning in desperation. But then, as soon as Hagar gets pregnant, the whole power dynamic flips on its head. Suddenly, for the first time ever, Hagar has a status that her mistress doesn't. And with that comes pride. She starts, as the text says, lording it over Sarah. And wow, that was a dangerous, dangerous move. It just ignites this bitter, toxic rivalry.
Sarah's response? It is swift and it is cruel. She puts Hagar back in her place, reasserting her dominance in the harshest way possible. It gets so bad that Hagar feels like she has no other choice. So pregnant and completely alone, she does the only thing she can think of. She runs. She flees into the brutal, unforgiving desert.
But this is the thing. It's right here, in this moment of absolute total desolation, that Hagar's story takes this incredible turn. She ran away to be alone, but it turns out she's not. This is where she has her first encounter in the wilderness with the God who sees.
So out there in the desert, an angel finds her. And listen to this. For what might be the very first time in her life, someone speaks to her not as an object, not as property, but as a person with a future. She gets a promise. You're going to have a son, and you're going to name him Ishmael. And there's a very specific reason why, because the Lord has heard your misery.
The name itself is the message. Think about it, Ishmael. It literally means God hears. So every single time Hagar would call her son's name for the rest of her life, it would be this powerful, constant reminder of that moment. That when she was at her absolute lowest, miserable and alone in the desert, she wasn't forgotten. She was heard.
And this leads to something truly incredible. Hagar, a foreigner, a slave, a runaway, becomes the very first person in the entire Bible to actually give God a name. She calls him El Roi. And what does that mean? The God who sees me. In a life defined by invisibility, she finally felt seen.
So Hagar does what she's told. She goes back. But, you know, this kind of truce was never going to last. Fast forward 16 years. A second crisis blows up. And this time, it leads to a final, absolutely brutal rejection.
Right, so after all this time, Sarah finally has her own son, Isaac. And that old jealousy,
it doesn't just come back. It flares into a full-blown inferno. She can't even stand the sight of Ishmael anymore, so she demands that Abraham get rid of them, cast Hagar and her teenage son out for good. And this time, it's final. They are officially expelled, sent out into the desert with nothing but a little bread and a single container of water.
And what happens next is it's gut-wrenching. The water runs out, Hagar is convinced her son is going to die, so she puts him under a bush because she can't bear to watch it happen. She walks away, sits down, and just weeps. I mean, can you even imagine? This is rock bottom. It doesn't get any lower than this.
And yet, just like before, in her darkest moment, her cry is heard. This is really the climax of her whole story. It's where a promise and a well bring deliverance when all hope seems lost.
An angel's voice literally breaks through her sobbing, and it echoes what happened all those years ago. "Do not be afraid," the voice says. "God has heard the boys crying." And again, there's a promise, not just you're going to survive this, but a promise of a real future. Ishmael will become a great nation. And then this happens. It's like a miracle of perception. Her eyes are opened, and she sees a well of water, a source of life that, was probably there the whole time, but she was just so blinded by her grief and despair she couldn't see it. Where there was certain death just moments before, now there's survival. And this right here is the heart of her entire story. For a single mom, an outcast with no friends, no family, zero resources, a way was made for her. In the most impossible place you can imagine, a future was secured for her and her son.
Hagar's experience is such a perfect, real-world example of this promise you find later in the Psalms. It's this powerful testament that even when you're walking right through the middle of trouble, totally surrounded by impossible circumstances, deliverance is still possible.
So at the end of the day, Hagar's story really leaves us with a question, doesn't it? A question for our own lives. When we're in our own personal wilderness, those times of loneliness, despair, or hopelessness, how do we find our well? Her journey seems to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the very thing we need to survive is right there in front of us. We just need our eyes to be open to see it. It's such a powerful reminder that even when we feel completely and totally invisible, we might just be on the verge of truly being seen. Thank you for listening, and do subscribe to our channel for more.